Welcome to the nonprofit renaissance.
Oh, you're doing the intro now?
Colin, is that what's happening? We've been talking. We've been hanging, and you're listening to none other than, listen, development officer, the original, the OG for Liberty University here. Is that correct?
Yeah.
We're talking mercy ship involvement, and we're going to dive into. Now, you were not captain of the boat, right? Just making
I was
sure.
not.
Okay, that's not
that
what.
place would be lost if I was captain of one of the ships.
But and much, much more. The list goes on, and we're going to talk a lot today about fit fundraising, about his book Rainmaking. But please welcome to the podcast, Colin, the one, the only
Roy Jones.
Roy Jones. Applause. Yes.
How's it going? It's so good to have you. Let me run through real quick. 30 years, 30 plus years.
And I am not a heavyweight boxing champion. But
Yeah.
for the record, Roy Jones Jr. did give me royjones.org.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
It didn't make me fight for it. So,
I was going to say, you offered. He was like, no, I don't want to. I don't want that.
Once he saw what we were doing and helping nonprofits, he actually gave us the .org. So.
Would have been a great pay-per-view fundraising, though. It's like, hey, we'll do a live fight between Roy Jones and Roy Jones.
I kind of outweigh the guy. But I'm an old center from Liberty University. Played heavyweight, never boxed.
Oh, wow. You got to, MMA then. We'll do MMA.
MMA.
You take him to the ground. Well, so 30 plus years of relationship building, coalition development, marketing, fundraising experience. You've got a book out, an award-winning book called Rainmaking, The Fundraiser's Guide to Landing Big Gifts. Talked about service development, vice president at Mercy Ships. You've got degrees and certifications for days, served on multiple big boards of big organizations. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with you to talk about fundraising and help our nonprofit listeners get the big gifts, get the big donors, because that's how they're gonna do their mission. So
yeah, I know you told us about royjones.org already. So that can redirect. But tell us about Fit Fundraising.
Well, we decided to create a brand around what we do. And that's really what we do. It started out, my wife and I set up a foundation to do training for nonprofit leaders, and it was originally called Fundraising Institute Training. And that's where the FIT acronym came from. And so that kind of stuck, and then it went to FIT Fundraising. And it really is just helping people understand how to minister to donors, because that's really what we do.
Yeah.
There are certain people in nonprofit organizations that get to minister and care for people, for puppies, for kittens, for all kinds of neat things. But I feel called to minister to people who provide the resources to make that stuff happen.
Yeah. And so you've got a pretty impressive career behind you. And I think you said you launched this fairly recently. And
yeah, really just about 7 months ago, we rebranded, staffed up, and we've got about 8 clients right now. One of the unique things that we do, though, and it's part of our marketing strategy, is we provide free fundraising counsel. And so we've actually helped 41 different nonprofits this year. 8 of them started paying us. And so
all right, so let's start there. So let's break that down. So you're offering free advice, free counsel, free.
What does that look like?
Yeah, it usually begins by a lot of people think, I can just hire the big bald guy, and he's got a secret magic black book of donors.
Was that .com available? Big bald. Was it baldguy.com? That would stick.
And he's got this secret magic black book, and he can just open them up, and people know him. And he raised $200 million at Mercy Ships. He raised $400 million over 5 years at Liberty University. He's raised a lot of money other places. A lot of people know him, so they'll just give to me too. Doesn't work that way. And the first thing I do is start with their donor file. If it's 100 donors, 1,000 donors, 10,000 donors, or 50,000 donors, it starts with their file.
Gotcha.
And what I help them to do to begin with is do a real analysis on are donors climbing the ladder? Are they upgrading? Because what most people fail to realize, these major donors, they don't come from my list. They come from their list, and they don't give money away. They make investments.
That's good.
And so a big donor, somebody with great capacity, their first gift, I challenge people. Who's your biggest individual donor? They'll give me a name. So what do you think their first gift was? Oh, 10,000, 50,000. Let's look at the file.
Yep.
It's usually under $100.
Boom.
Wow.
Testing the waters.
And that's what they do. They do their giving just like they do their investments. They put a little bit in, they see a return on that investment, they see impact. Guess what they do? They add a zero.
Yeah.
It usually takes a major donor 3 to 5 gifts before they're at their capacity level. And it's getting people to understand that the solution of the problem they're having with fundraising is right in front of them. Every day, I mean, I'm with ministries, I'm with nonprofits. Every day, I hear them say, I've been in the room with them when they prayed, God, give us $1 million. We need this. This will help us. God doesn't send money. He sends people with money.
Yeah.
And it's our job. The worst mistake we make in fundraising is asking millionaires for $25. And we do it every day.
Wow.
And we do it every day. And we prayed and we said, please, please, and guess what? He provided the solution. And because they were on your chicken list, or because you didn't take the time to get to know them, to see what their passion was, to see where their heart was, to see what they had been prepared to do, why they, it doesn't matter whether they were introduced to you through paid search, doesn't matter whether they were introduced to you through direct mail, doesn't matter whether they were introduced to you through an event or some community activity, they were brought your way for a purpose. And that's our job, is showing people, listen, you gotta qualify people. And that's people, and I mean, of course, I'm kind of focused on, and sorry to sound like a preacher, but
No, bring it. Pastor Roy, Jones.
but I'm really focused on the parable of the talents.
That's right.
Somebody, God sends me somebody that wants to give $1,000. I'm not going to ask them for 25. And guess what? I do the right thing in 1,000, they're going to add a zero and it becomes 10. They do the right thing with 10, guess what? They're going to add a zero and it becomes 100. And that's how it happens.
Love it.
That's how it happens. And so often, donors go away. Big donors come to a nonprofit and they give a time or two. We treat them like just a regular donor. We send them all this, e-blasts and direct mail, and I do all that stuff. But it's our job to find out who they are and use segmentation, create unique messaging, so that the bigger capacity donors get bigger projects to look at, and the regular donors get the smaller projects to look at.
Let's pause for a second there. Break that down for our listener. They're a nonprofit leader, C-suite. They've been at it for a while. How are you doing that today? Segmentating. How are you creating different messages? How are you identifying, number one? Let's say it's just an email and a phone number on your list. What are some tips, some hacks? This is the free stuff, guys. Then you got to call Roy for the rest.
You got to stop that. Okay? Create free offers, but free is a relative term. You only get free if you give me your name and address.
There we go. So
I can't do wealth research with an email. I can't do wealth research with a phone number, to be honest with you.
So, okay, what does it take? Bring it on. What else?
I need a physical address.
Okay.
If I have a physical address, it's kind of scary.
Bring it on.
But I basically know all the assets registered at that address. Every household in America has been indexed. They pretty much know the disposable income of every household in America. It's available.
It's available.
Any asset, you say any asset, pretty much any asset. Cars, believe it or not, people forget the Security Exchange Commission is a government entity. And guess what the SEC does? They rent that money out. You apply for a small business loan, or you apply for a second mortgage. If you don't check the box specifically prohibiting them from using that data before your loan is approved or denied, the wealth profiling companies have it.
There it is. This is worth the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We're just going to put this clip
right here
on repeat. And that's gold.
But you got to get a physical name and address. That's where the magic happens.
And it's funny, in a digital world, how much we devalue the address, right? Because we feel like an email,
that's
social
snail mail. It's a waste of. Let me tell you something.
LinkedIn gives me the six-figure. No.
Here's what I learned at Mercy Ships. Here's what I learned at Liberty University. Here's what I've learned when I was at Russ Reed, and they had over 600 nonprofit clients. If I can just break even on the direct response program, I'll do that every day, hands down.
Wow.
Because I make my money with the big gifts.
That's it.
If you're netting money in your digital acquisition program, you're not spending enough. If you're making money in your paid search, you're not spending enough. If you're making money in your email marketing campaigns, you're not spending enough, because your net should come from your one-on-ones.
Well, yep.
How many people are you meeting with? Those are the metrics that count. And it's teaching people that hey, because here's the thing, people with capacity. Don't get me wrong. As I said, there's two buckets of donors. There are those that I lovingly call the widow's mite donor.
Absolutely.
They give everything they have. They give out of Social Security. They don't have a big gift to give, but they give as much as they can.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is push them or twist their arm. You can push them right out of the boat by asking for too much. But then you have that other group, that the parable of the talents group, that they're making investments and they're increasing their giving. And you got to spend time with those people. Those people don't do business with strangers.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good.
They give, on average, according to the Association of Fundraising Professionals, to 7.2 charities a year. Now, when I was at Mercy Ships, we actually surveyed 2,000 of our top donors and found out that they gave to 11 charities a year. But so it depends on the nonprofit. But that's what you have to understand. If you don't get with them and build relationships with them, the other nonprofits are. And guess what they do? You go from being number 1 to number 4 to number 6 to number 7 to giving every other year to, guess what? They lapsed.
Yeah.
Donors climb up the ladder, but donors can also climb down the ladder. And then if you don't treat them right, they fall off the ladder.
So what's the secret? Because how do we get them then to continue to climb up the ladder and not go down? Right? What's the yin and the yang there?
It's about their passion, not yours.
Oof.
The first thing I did when I got to Mercy Ships, I think they had 3 people on staff, and they had these IBM Surface pads, and on those pads were loaded PowerPoint deck presentations, and they were going out with donors and flip page, flip page, flip page, flip page. We need this much money here.
Sign.
Flip page, flip page, flip page. Need it here. So I walked in and said, I got a new tool. And I grabbed those surfaces, picked them up, stacked them on the table. So we have a new tool. And if you can't see me, it's pen and paper. And we're going to sit and we're going to talk to people. We're going to find out what their passion is. And then fundraising's easy.
Yeah.
You don't need that big PowerPoint deck. You don't need that super demo. It's about their passion. 9 times out of 10, they already know what they want to do. They're just waiting for somebody to ask them. And you find that out,
Yeah.
man.
By listening.
Listen,
Yeah.
By
It's-
listening.
the
As simple
best
as that.
fundraisers are always the best listeners. And I've hired hundreds. That's another thing that the firm is doing. We do it right now. We've got 2 paid searches going on right now, is helping our team hire experienced development directors, major gift officers, people with hands-on experience.
And who are you serving the most, Roy? Schools, churches? What kind of nonprofits?
A little bit of everything. I mean, we've got a search going on right now at Westminster Academy in Fort Myers, Florida. Dr. T. James Kennedy's former school, and we're excited about serving schools. But then we're also doing another one for the C.S. Lewis Society here. We've done some staffing for some of the Association of Gospel Rescue Missions, what it used to be called. It's now called City Gate Network. But with some of our clients there in the homeless shelter space. You're looking at a guy. I have slept in 50 homeless shelters across America.
Wow.
And have helped
As a fundraising challenge,
as
or because
just to save them money, and I want to know about their ministry.
that's amazing.
And if I go in to help them,
Colin, we may need to do that for these episodes.
Hey,
Just take them, spend the nights when we go to the out of state.
and that's where that's where we'll record.
there you go.
I like that. See,
You'll find out something about that ministry. I can promise you.
believe. Now, Roy, one thing that stands out from what you're doing is not you've been there, done that, which you have for years now. Whether it's Liberty, we mentioned, whether it's Mercy Ships, and many others. You're in it. You're still doing it. You're meeting with donors face to face. You're doing the. Tell us why that's important. And
Well, it's really different in our industry to begin with. First of all, it's unique in that most people don't want to go through the trouble of registering as a solicitor in their state.
Hmm.
And so registering as fundraising counsel, that's no problem. Registering as a solicitor, it's a challenge.
Why? Break down the difference.
Well,
One,
in some states, Florida, it's not so bad. But if I'm whatever state I'm doing actual fund solicitation in, I have to register as a solicitor. You know, some states like New York, I got to post a $50,000 bond. You know, and so because of the structure that political leaders have created, and again, it's all done for the right reasons. It's about transparency. If a donor wants to check out a charity, they need to be able to go to the government website, look at their contracts, look at their 990, look at the firms like Fit Fundraising that they've engaged with, see what they're being paid. They want to make sure that if they make a donation, that it's going to the charity, not to the big bald guy. And so they deserve that. So I'm not opposed to that. But because of that, a lot of agencies have gotten out of the field. You know, I mean, I know hundreds of agencies, and most of them have not met with a donor in 20 years.
gotcha.
And things change.
Oh yeah.
Donors engage differently. I mean, every 4 or 5 years, the methodology changes. It goes back and forth. You know, it's interesting. 4 years ago, you know, I would tell people, you know, don't use the phone. Donors don't want to use the phone. You know, you got to get face to face with people. Today, I'm doing more phone work than I've ever done in 20 years. It's the phone is
phone
back.
calls. Are you text messaging? Is
Well,
that too?
you got to do both.
Both.
And integration is the key. You know, you do have to use email. You do have to use text. You do have to actually use voicemail, and then actually you use all three of those things to actually have an actual conversation.
Social networks. Tell me about those for a little bit.
It's social media is still PR,
Yep.
not DR. You know, it's still public relations. You're still building brand. You're building culture. You're building name ID. It's still not. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, it's still not the space that you raise the revenue in. You know, I mean, most of these tools that we use, you know, I call them drivers and converters. And so there are drivers that kind of push people to where they can convert, actually make a donation. And again, I call a converter an actual donation, not eyeballs on a page, not somebody opened something, not impressions.
That's great.
But somebody actually gives you money.
There's a transaction.
Right? There's a transaction. And so you got to have the drivers to get people to convert. You know, in the old days, direct mail, that was always a converter. People sent back that reply envelope with a check in it. Well, now direct mail has become a driver.
Interesting.
And so the reply devices don't, you know, probably 50%, depends on the nonprofit, but I've talked to many that are seeing as high as 50% of all their direct mail donations come online.
Interesting.
So
the website, the QR code.
But if they didn't send the mailing out, they wouldn't go online to give.
No driver. Yeah.
And so direct mail is quickly becoming a driver, not a converter. But if you shut down your direct mail program, trust me, you're going to be out of business.
You feel it. Yeah.
You're going to feel it.
Yeah.
And I know people that have just flipped the switch, and it's the worst thing you can do.
Wow.
You have to integrate. You've got to do both or all. And whether it's, you know, you touched on them, texting, email, social media, old-fashioned snail mail. You got to do them all.
And Roy, tell me about this. Obviously, here in Verse and through the podcast, we're in the business of telling those stories, of sharing the impact, of helping the nonprofits we serve that are listening right now gauge, highlight what's converted, create the drivers for them. What, in your opinion, are essential? These are key essential drivers that must happen, and some that you would say, hey, let's reconsider this or take a look at this. It's not what it's amped up to be. Any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be real careful because if you asked any donor, do you want to get mail? The answer is no. If you asked any donor, do you want to get more email? No.
Spam.
Do you want to get more text messages from us? No.
True.
Okay, so my recommendation is just understand you do have to work with the frequency. Most of the nonprofits I see today are doing, believe it or not, almost 1 email a day on average.
Really?
150 to 200 emails a year. And okay, now do the math. If the average nonprofit,
Wow.
if the average nonprofit donor is giving to 7.2 charities,
They're flooded.
do the math.
They're flooded. So is there fatigue there? Because I mean,
Well,
that's,
there is.
yeah.
But there, the other side is there are people that read it all.
and there's results. Yeah.
Usually I've heard it described, and I think it's more like this. It's like a river. You throw the line and hook out there. You don't catch a fish every time you throw it out there, but all of a sudden, boom, here's this whole school that just happens to be there at that time when you cast. And so you got to keep casting.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. If you're not in that space, somebody else is. And so, my recommendation though is really looking at using segmentation. And again, every organization has a different level as to what's considered a major donor. When I was at Mercy Ships, it was like 5-figure giving was a major donor. You look at World Vision, 6-figure giving is a major donor.
Starting point.
Yeah, starting point.
Yeah.
They have 150 full-time major gift officers around the
I
country.
believe it. They're probably
They're
1.5 bill plus.
Yes,
Yeah,
they're doing
yeah.
$1 billion a year plus, and they meet with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So they create a treatment. We create a treatment for the big donors. It's usually less frequency, but it's more personalized frequency. And what I mean by that is there's not a lot of big fancy graphics. It's not a lot of super amazing video things. They dumb it down.
Simple.
And they keep it simple. And it really looks like the president sat down in Outlook and sent them an Outlook message. When they get the corresponding letter that goes with it, it really looks like
A note from the president.
he sent that laser jet off his desk, and it went out that way. And the copy's written. It's not a lot of we and us and our and this big thing where we're casting this thing to millions. No, it is me and you.
Yeah. It's, hey, Jim, I want to say thank you.
It is very,
Yeah.
very, and so it's a different tone. Might be the same exact offer, the same project, but the tone is different. And then you've got to create middle donor communications, and that's kind of a hybrid between the mass marketing, the one-to-many, and what I just described, the one-to-one.
Yeah.
And the biggest difference with your middles, where one-to-many, you're tailoring your ask, not only your offer, but your ask amount, how much you're asking for. And so now with your majors, you tend to, for the most part, go to open ask. And so people,
What does that look like?
It's literally a blank.
Really? So that's at the top tier.
Right.
You're going blank.
Right. And you might
You share the goal?
you might share the goal. You might share what they've given in the past.
Okay.
And it's written in such a way, hey, a year ago you helped us with a gift for $10,000. Thank you. I want you to pray about helping us this year. It is mission critical. And so, you put that custom in there, but it's not listed as 10,000, 5,000, 2,500, 1,000. It's
Right.
It's an open.
Whereas you would want to do something like that with that kind of that middle level and lower.
Yes. And usually the different people have different preferences. Usually with that middle donor segment, you're not going to use a gift array that's 5 figures plus. Especially if you're building an offer around the number of people fed or the number of people helped. It can kind of look weird. Your gift of 100,000 helps us with 50,000 meals. And we're only going to feed 2,000 next week. It's and so you have to kind of be careful. Offer development is key.
Yeah, it's good.
You got to think through these offers when you do segmentation, and just realize that the bigger people, they don't want you spending money on them. And they're investors.
I need to have a question on that. I served at a nonprofit a few years ago, raising about $30 million annually. So fairly, not in the billions, but large.
But they're sophisticated,
Yes.
sure.
and we developed a tier system now inspired by American Express,
Mm-hmm.
where you would enter certain levels. And it's interesting because I could justify and say that it was successful because there were conversions, there
Right.
were results. At the same time, there was a lot of drop offs because no, obviously it was a faith based nonprofit. Saying, no, I don't want to be categorized or put into this level or this tier or gold, platinum, black,
Right.
titanium. And it was a very obvious type of gift you got, type of treatment you got,
Right.
type of seat you got. So
Right.
it became and this is, let's say, a decade plus ago. Okay. It made for creative very easy because this was categorized.
Right.
This was very simple. The messaging, the segmentation was clear. Where are we today? I think in the consumer, obviously American Express does well with that in creating in the from first class to business class to the access to the lounge
Right.
or access to the tickets. Does it work? Have you seen it? What would be your recommendation?
It really depends on the nonprofit. And in some cases, it will work and be great. In other cases, it won't. Because, I mean, what you have to realize is over time, you are training donors to act a certain way.
Correct.
And so if they've been used to responding in that tiered concept, it could work very well. But if they really haven't been trained that way, that this is our culture and this is how we identify offers and this is how we fund projects, it'll bomb. So I wish I had a straight answer for you.
No, that's
There's
good.
really not. It depends on the culture and the history. In some cases, that's exactly the right move. In
Yeah.
other cases, it'll be disastrous.
No, that's a great point on the conditioning too of who you're trying to onboard, because it's a culture of the leadership, the culture of the company or the
Right.
organization. That makes sense.
The hardest thing for most nonprofits to realize is that the way you grow revenue is by feeding this fight with manpower. And they refuse to spend the money to staff up. And the average major gift officer in America, and again, I've interviewed thousands. I've hired several hundred over the last couple decades. I've fired 20 or 30. They were, I wouldn't have hired them if they weren't great talkers, but I had to fire them because what I do is measure activity.
Results, right?
And again, when I say results, I'm not talking about how much money did they raise. I don't count the money. I count the activity.
Put in the work.
How many actual conversations did you have by phone and email and text? What meaningful communications did you have?
Yep.
How many face-to-face meetings did you have? How many projects did you discuss? If you're measuring those kind of metrics, going to raise a lot of money.
Is it a numbers game, Roy, at that point?
It is.
It is.
It is.
If the output's 100, I'm going to yield 10, and it's going to.
And again, but with these, let me tell you a story, and I won't give her full name. I won't tell the organization she was with.
But it's Samantha Jones from World Vision. No, I'm kidding.
But
Just kidding.
You better hope there's not a Samantha Jones at World
No, there's
Vision.
not. Nothing to do.
This lady's name was Amy, and she's on the West Coast. That's all I'll tell you. But she came to me and she said, "I've got a portfolio of about 120 names. These people will never be able to give more than $500,000. I know them. I've talked to them. I've met with them. I know what their giving history is. They will never do it." I said, "Amy, trust me. If you will do 8 to 10 meetings a month, if you will begin to instead of going out and pitching, to go out and have conversations about what they want to do. It's a totally different engagement strategy. I am not measuring how much money you raised. I'm measuring how many of those kinds of conversations did you have. And within a year, she did like 1.2 million. Within 3 years from those same people,
Wow.
she generated about $5 million.
Wow.
Why? Because she ministered
She
to
put in the
them.
reps.
She put in the reps.
She put in the
And
reps.
that's
She got in
from
front of them.
8 a month.
Yes.
From 8 a month. And just that
Yeah,
two visits a week. Boom,
and right, so
boom,
super
boom.
curious now. So we're going to expand for those local and say, well, I have my little zip code, or I have my region, and I have my state, and obviously you're flying all over the country, the world. Talk to us about, because in some ways it becomes very sales reppy, but we're not sales. There's the development of relationships. Break that down, like virtually in 2020, that changed, right? That everybody had to figure that out. Tell us
Yes,
the
but
climate.
I mean, these even during COVID, these big investors, they still wanted to meet. Now they may not have been able to take a meeting, or they did one on one end of a table
6
and
feet
another
apart,
end
please.
table.
3 masks and 6 feet.
Right.
Yeah, and
But-
glass.
Four
Remember,
plexiglass.
they're investors. They don't just give money away to strangers.
In some ways, more scrutinized even during that pandemic, right?
Absolutely.
They wanted to know.
They wanted to know more.
Yeah.
And as you know, people gave more during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And they didn't do that accidentally. They were intentionally seeking out conversations.
Good.
This didn't happen because we sent some magic email to them or some unique direct mail piece. This happened because they met with major gift specialists one-on-one. That's how it happened. And again, that one-on-one, don't get me wrong, I do think during the peak time of the pandemic, there were a lot of Zoom meetings, but I have found people are sick of them right now. And they, they'll do a Zoom meeting just to schedule a real meeting.
Yeah.
Now, so the 8 to 10, like we're going to use Amy from the West Coast, will remain unnamed, but you can find a link to her profile, LinkedIn here. I'm just kidding. Does a virtual meeting or a phone call to you equate the result of a physical meeting?
It can. It absolutely can.
Okay.
I call them meaningful contacts.
Okay.
It can be a move. Again, if it's conversational. If you're just pitching, stop pitching. We don't raise money by pitching. It doesn't work that way. It is about talking about projects, talking about what the donor's thinking about. It's about setting the expectation. When people, and again, I talk about how we train donors with our methodology. Donors know if they fall into one of the programs that I've helped develop, that our expectation is, Mrs. Smith, I promise you, and I'll say this on the phone, I'll say this in person, usually the first time I sit down with somebody, what I like to do, and I wish I could say it was just me, but our board wants me to meet with our top supporters, and you're one of them. Thank you. Last year, you gave whatever the number was, $20,000, $30. Over the last 10 years, do you know how many donations you've made? No. Well, you made 287 gifts. And as a matter of fact, you've given $140,000.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our board has asked me to meet with you once a year. They want me to give you an impact report on how we spent your money last year. And then they do want me to find out what you want to do this year. They've asked me intentionally not to come in here and just pitch stuff. And so I promise you, when I call you, I'm not calling to pitch. I'm calling so that we can have our annual planning meeting and you tell me where your passion is and what you want to do this year. Because I find those passions do shift a little bit, Mrs. Smith. And now I have other people that have been supporting the same thing for a decade, but we want this. I want you to know this is about you. I wish we could do this with every donor. We can't. As you know, we have 23,000 donors to the organization. I can only meet with about 100 people. And you are one of the 100 top people to this organization. That's why I'm calling you.
That's a masterclass right there.
What? Yeah, if you didn't, we're gonna script this and print this. That was no,
And-
Roy, that's
and
fantastic.
they love it.
I love that.
They love it. I while I'm there, I'm probing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
You talked about being a good listener. The worst fundraisers are the best talkers. The people that are pitching, the people that blah 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 blah. They're the worst fundraisers. You got to shut up. I mean, if more than 25% of the conversation is you talking, you're not going to raise any money. It is about the donor telling you what projects they're interested in, them understanding why you're here. Again,
That's great.
pulling out that that high tech yellow
Blank
tablet,
page, yellow tablet.
and say, "Would you care if I wrote that down?"
It's amazing.
And you know, I lean in, they lean in.
Yeah.
I mean, they're amazed that somebody's actually listening to them.
Right.
Then I go to the door. And for you older folks out there, I call this the Columbo close. But some of the younger people call it the door hinge. All right. So you want some techniques?
Bring it.
So as you leave, you've written down, they told you what their one thing is.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got that one thing. They've told you what it is, what they want to do. As you leave, you know, you kind of do. You remember Columbo, the program? I know it's you'll have to go back and YouTube it tonight.
I do, yes.
You'll have to YouTube it tonight. But he was this frumpy old detective. And everybody thought he was clueless, didn't know what was going on. He wore an old wrinkled overcoat and
It's a British show?
And no, it's an American
it's a
show.
Okay.
And so YouTube it tonight. And you'll get a kick out of it because in every episode, you know, he's interrogating the criminal. The criminal thinks he got away with it. He goes to the door. He turns the doorknob. He goes to step out, and then he looks back. You know what? I forgot something. One more thing. And then he asks that one question that just crushes that criminal. He knows they're going to jail.
Got him.
It got him. And so some of my younger audience call that the door hinge.
No,
so when I get to the door hinge, before I walk out, I tap my head and say, "Oh, now, Mrs. Smith, you said you had a passion for helping children. I'd like to go back to our children's program director and find out what our biggest needs are in that area and come back to you with a couple of those to look at. How does that sound to you?" Guess what?
Boom.
Of course.
Custom
She's,
to the.
most of the time they say, "You do that for me?
I love it.
You do that for me?"
Yeah.
You bet. I can't do it for everybody. I can only meet with about 100 people a year. But yes, Mrs. Smith, I can do it for you.
Wow.
I love how sincere, how strategic, how successful that is, and engaging, and truly engaging.
It's what donors want.
Yes.
They're waiting for people to treat them like people. They're waiting for somebody to listen to them, not just send them, 200 emails a year.
Yeah.
Here's what we need. Here's what we need.
Or
here's what we
gifts
need.
that are going to get tossed or given away.
They want a one-on-one relationship. And they want to do business with people they know.
Roy, tell me about this. That's you're developing an engaged donor. Tell me about activation. What kind of conversation are you having with someone you've identified the address, the zip code, and they've given 0. And as far as you know, they're not engaged.
I don't spend much time with those kind of people.
Really? Tell me. So why not? Who should?
That's the heaviest lift in the business. Anything you read, it's going to take you 6 to 18 months to get a donation from that person. I don't have that kind of time.
Oof. Who should? Should we get into that business?
Again, that's the purpose of direct response.
There we go.
The first gift, get $25 from them.
So
then they'll do 100. Then they'll do 250. Then they do 500. They start to show up on my radar screen then.
So let them exercise the muscle in different engagements.
Yes, they're going to engage with you. Again, that's how they do it. I don't think they sit down with a plan that, okay, this year I'm going to check out 10 new charities, but they do. It's instinctive. It's visceral.
Yes.
They do. They make a certain number of their gifts are going to be smaller gifts. They're going to put it in and see what happens. And that's how you acquire big donors. Don't, again, if, and I'm not saying don't ever, because I've done a bunch of it myself. But if you're going to cold call people with capacity, who could make a 5-figure, 6-figure gift, don't spend more than 20% of your time doing that.
That's great advice.
Because you will be looking for a job within 6 months.
Wow.
And that's where most of our industry is today. And there's a reason for that. They get pressure put under them, desperation. Their senior management, the board, they don't know how fundraising really happens. They think, oh no, major donors come in and they write a $10,000 gift out of the chute.
No.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that way.
So what's the process then? Once you've identified, because you leave the 0 givers alone. You don't worry about them. You want to build a reputation of an actual giver. Once you identify, then what is that process to getting to where our our friend is, where you went and visited and you said, this is all you've given. How do you go from, what's the intermediate there? What's the process? What's the expectation?
It usually takes, the first thing that, and this is the hardest part for development directors, CEOs, board chair people, and major gift officers to understand. But it usually takes about 6 months for these donors to, first of all, believe that, oh, he's or she's going to actually stay there. Because guess what? You're probably the 10th person in 10 years to call them from that charity. And they know it is a
Revolving door.
revolving door.
Yeah.
But if they say, oh, this guy's persistent, and again, you do have to keep your sanity, and you do have to be professional. I'm not saying you pound people, 7 times a week for 3 weeks to get in front of them. No, there's a rhythm to it. You're probably doing initially an email the first week with a voicemail as well. The second week, you're probably going to send a follow-up email. The third week, you're going to leave a voicemail. And if they don't respond, you move on. But again, I'm probably going to give it 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll cycle through again. And I'm going to give it about 3 cycles. So it's going to be 90 to 180 days of that for them to know
You're there.
there's only one way to get rid of me, and that's talk to me. And this is my job. And again, sometimes the truth works. I do not use voicemail. I do not use email. I do not use handwritten notes as paid public service announcements. Hello, this is Roy Jones calling. I just wanted to thank you for supporting the ministry. If you could give me a call back, I won't take much of your time, but I really would like to talk to you. And again, thank you so much for all you do for us. You are not going to get a call back with that voicemail.
Not at all.
And my voicemail, usually, and again, if you time it right, and you set up a process internally where anybody that's in your portfolio, in your assignments, if they make a gift for any amount, you are to be notified immediately. It's got to be a flag, a trigger on that database system to tell you, because that's the best time to get a call returned. Because
It's hot. Why?
Because
It's top
because
of
that
mind.
voicemail is, hey, this is Roy. Have a quick question regarding the donation you just made.
Boom.
I won't keep you on the phone more than a minute.
Oh, that's
Give me a
gold.
call back. Guess what? They call you back.
Oh yeah,
immediately.
They're thinking 10 things, right?
And-
They're like, what happened?
And I've
How much
used
did I
that-
actually send?
And
Yeah.
I've used that
great.
same process with the same donor dozens of times.
Yeah.
And they always call you back.
That's great.
And they usually know I'm calling to set up a visit. They know after talking to me a time or two that I rarely use the phone to ask for money. Now, I will do it, and I have done it. And sometimes I don't intend to do it, but the donor says, we don't need to meet. Let me, I've met with them before. I mean, they know me on a first name basis. They know my wife. They know about my kids, my grandkids. They're my friend.
Yeah.
So Roy, listen, we don't need to meet. Talk to me about that project you want to talk about.
Boom.
And usually it's the project that they already
Correct.
support. They probably know more about it than I know.
Love it.
And so it's
At that point, what's your action step there? How do you not let that slip? Is it what's the CTA?
It's in some cases I'll just jump right at it. Say, well, here's what's going on. I talked to the program director today. Wanted to get your thoughts. We thought this might be something you'd be interested in helping us with. Last year you helped us with 10,000. We'd like you to consider a gift of 15 this year. Hear how quiet it got. The next one that speaks loses. That's how it works.
Man, that's
It's
key.
a conversation, and it's the same way in person. When I leave a voicemail with people, I never tell them why I'm calling.
Beautiful.
I make the voicemail about their time, and they know if they're on the phone with me, once they talk to me a time or two, I am not the guy that keeps them on the phone for 20 minutes. If they call me back and they're on the phone more than a minute, it's too long. And that's why I get callbacks. because I've trained them. They know if they call
Love
me
it.
back, it's going to be quick. I'm not going to use the phone to chew up their day. That phone is a specific tool primarily so I can get in front of them.
Yeah.
And right into how valuable, right, in an artificial intelligent world we live in today. I'm doing air quotes here. How valuable that real touch phone call, humanized, 1 minute or less. Doesn't have to be an hour catch up. It's huge.
And it's integrated.
Correct.
If you're just doing phone calls, you're not going to get a call back.
Correct.
You got to do a phone call. You got to do an email. You got to do text. And then now, of course, the latest thing is not just a text. You got to leave a recorded message on the text.
Correct.
Or
a video.
Or a video.
Yeah, or a video.
So I mean, and so, but it's integration. I hate to say this because I so want to, I'm 65 years old. My sons are 40 and 38 and 31, and I so want to talk to them, but usually I get to text them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll actually leave each other voicemails, but we're going back and forth, and that's kind of how people communicate these days.
I blame the boomers, man. They did that to us. And,
It's a different world.
It is.
But you got to use them all.
Yes.
You got to use them all.
You can't ignore, including what you said, the printed pieces, the direct. To ignore that, you are leaving the touch points on the table, right?
And there are some people, especially if they're considering, making a substantial gift, they like that piece of paper. There's just something about
Tangible.
touching it. There's something tactile about it that they pray over it, literally.
Yeah.
I've gone into people's homes and they have 3 or 4 stacks of certain letters, different things they're thinking about, praying about, I talked about feeding this fight with manpower. There's some military tools here, but there was a Civil War general that said, "He who gets there the firstest with the mostest wins," and the person that spent the right amount of time on that piece of paper, that really tailored that message and made it one-to-one and really told the story, they're the one that get the money.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I equate it, I've got 5 kids, Roy, and we've got a bazillion digital photos and things going on our phones of them. But what makes it to the fridge, that drawing or that picture, that's going to get the daily attention, conversation, multiple. So there's something to that.
Yep.
And it doesn't devalue the digital, but there's
You
something
still have
about
my drawing up there?
I had to take it down. It was, we prayed enough for the
Well,
request.
that does make me think of another thing that I think really works well in these meetings. They know after meeting with me a time or two that I never come empty-handed. And usually I'm bringing them a gift that was made by somebody in our program. When I was at Mercy Ships, I used to bring wealthy people over to the ship. We'd fly to Africa together. They'd pay for their own trip. And I ran into a guy there that had received a surgery, and he was a wood carver. And he carved a little giraffe and gave it to me. And I said, "You love doing that?" "I love it." He said, "How many of those could you do a month?" He said, "I could do 50 a month." I said, "What would you sell them to me for?" He goes, $1. Of course, $50 a month is probably twice their
wage.
wage.
Yeah.
I said, "You have a contract."
You've been commissioned.
And so
That's
you know,
awesome.
and so for a year, the first thing I would do is give every donor I met with
Here's where it
something
came
made
from.
by one of
Man,
our
I love
clients.
that.
Talk about marketing. That's right there on their counter every time they look at it.
And I mean, if their house catches on fire,
They're
that's
protecting.
coming out. That's coming out with them.
Yeah.
It means something to them.
I believe it.
And again, you talk about children's drawings. So many times, whether it's a homeless shelter, a ministry to families, people in need, just creating color pages that have the words "thank you" at the bottom, and have the kids color those,
love it.
and give it back. And guess what I do? I frame it and mat it with the organization logo at the top. Go to Hobby Lobby. You can buy a frame and mat for $1.50.
Yeah.
And that whole thing cost $1.50. And I'm telling you, I've gone into people's homes and you got to kind of keep track because you can't give them the same drawing more than once. So you do have to
You said this was from Susie last year, Roy.
you got to make sure it's a different drawing.
Of course, yeah.
But that kind of thing.
It's huge.
It just makes when you can tie the gift to the program in some
mission, yeah.
way, it just means something to the donor. And and again, these donors, they all say they don't want to be thanked, and they don't want to be treated special, and they don't want anybody to do anything special for them. They lie.
Is
They
that okay?
do.
You,
They
30 plus years.
absolutely
How many
do.
years of experience? 30, 40?
Well, over 40 now.
Over 40 now.
So
So that plays true because I've heard that too, Roy.
It's-
No, listen, I want to be anonymous. I don't want people to know. I don't want to.
well, you can respect anonymity, but still thank them.
That's good.
And so you do have to be careful about that. The really wealthy people don't want to be recognized because then you got 10 bald guys showing up on their doorstep. But they appreciate being thanked, and especially if it's from someone connected to your program. Don't go buy something slick.
Well,
Don't go spend a lot of money on something.
So you don't need the Rolex to nurture the gift.
Yeah. Or you don't even need the slick 4-color brochure and all that. You don't need all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Simple.
handcrafts of some kind.
The more personal.
The more personal, the better.
Especially at that level. Now, the investment is what you said earlier, Roy. It's the investment to raise is in the development, in the staffing, and it takes that.
Mm-hmm.
It takes that, which is, brings me to how do they find you? How can they connect with you? Those who are listening, they need some more coaching with their current team. Maybe they've got some entry level folks that are just getting started or looking to be, CDOs one day in their company.
And again, remember, how we begin most of our relationships is it starts out in kind of increments of 2-hour free conversations. We're not charging you. The meter's not running. When I go in to help a nonprofit, I want to find out what's broke, and I want to fix that. I don't want to go break something.
That's good.
I don't want to jump into something you're already doing well. No, I want to find the area that you need the most help and run in and help you fix that. But it's really easy. You can go to royjones.org or fitfundraising.com. They take you to the same place.
Or the bald guy.
And-
Well, yeah. Well, we'll get that for him.
You guys need to get that moniker for me. So, but yeah, and we'd be happy to talk to you anytime. And it is, it's what I do. And really it's teaching, modeling. And when I say modeling, I don't mean in a conference room somewhere. We do some of that, but the real application happens out in the field. When I can go out with people in the field and they see me do this, guess what they say? I can do that.
That's great.
I can do that. And so often they think it's some magic words that you say or some slick presentation or some super secret thing.
It's a magic trick. It's not at all.
It's not at all. It's about loving people. It's about ministering to people. It's about caring for them, finding out what their passion is, and then helping them do it.
That's great.
I love that. Before we wrap up, Colin, thank you so much, Roy. Just for fun fact, do you pay for the meal or do they let them pay for the meal?
I try to. I always try to. They rarely will let me.
Gotcha.
And so it's an honor to them to do it. And so there's been occasion where
You'll insist?
I'll insist.
Yeah.
But it's usually after I've
Arm wrestled.
wore them out for 2 months to get the meeting. But in most cases, they pay for the meal.
This is my last one, Colin. I promise, officially.
Okay.
Back to where we started.
Okay.
I'm even going to close this, okay? Back to where we started. You've got their email and their phone number. And we talked about the value of that address. And you've explained it so incredibly well. How do I get that? What's the best way? How have you seen the best way to get that?
Free offer. Free.
Bingo. So it's a value offer.
Nothing's more important than free.
Free book. I'm going to send you a free
And
something.
again, you could email it to them, but you don't get it unless I get your address. That's the way it works.
Boom.
And so it's and again, you're going to need to change those offers out, because not everybody responded to that one. So you're going to have to keep fishing with different bait
To get that.
to get that name and address. But it's important.
Is there a ratio, a standard value offer price point there you've seen successful on the offer? And again,
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of organizations, especially those with larger direct response programs, whether it's DRTV or direct response radio, we'll create a robust monthly giving program. Those tend to be under $20. Although I've seen them ratcheting up closer to $30 recently, but but it's the problem people wrestle with to acquire a new donor in a channel other than digital. You're going to spend between $150 and $250 to acquire a new donor. So what that means is, if the average gift is $100, it's going to take 2 gifts to break even.
To start.
to really get started.
To get started, yeah.
But you get that second gift, and the long-term donor value on that name is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so it pays for itself.
Correct.
But you kind of see that, and that's really what you're wrestling with. I mean, the downside, and I think you got to acquire donors. If you're not doing paid search, you're making a mistake. You're going to be able to acquire donors at a fraction of the cost. And when I say fraction, $30 to $60 a name versus $150 to $250 a name. The downside is you don't tend to get as many people who will wealth profile as a cash millionaire in the digital domain.
Yeah.
And so that's why you still want to do direct response acquisition, because you get older donors, and older donors have more disposable income. So you still got to have a mix. It's got to be a blend. And that's, if I could, when I look across the nonprofit sector right now, I mean, the biggest mistake that people make is putting all their eggs in one basket. They find one thing that works, and they, boom, jump there without thinking about the long-term consequences of that. Because when you do that, you can punch holes in your file. And yeah, it's good for a while, but long-term, it can really hurt you. So again, I think you got to do both, and these new channels that continue to come online to us, we got to use them all.
Yeah.
We got to use them all.
I love it. And again, one of our partners, I won't name it this time, but same does incredibly well with the 50-plus demographic. You're talking checks in the mail and millions. Shifted. They're still doing that, but going to a TikTok approach and Instagram and digital, thinking long term, thinking, well, that's going to be the 50-year-old, and they want the brand awareness, and that's helping them understand that they've been around, they're trusted, there's tenure, here's what they've been doing. So a very interesting shift, because then you're talking the segmentation there is obviously polarized.
I just pictured a group of 50-years doing dance,
and that's how we're going about.
That's right.
That'll be me.
We're in Gopher costumes.
There you go. Yes, Colin's our choreographer. So thanks for doing that.
Oh man, Roy, this has been great. What an incredible. Well, I'll just say you're welcome to our listeners, because we gave you something for free today that you probably should have paid for. But thank you so much. Hey, fitfundraising.com. If you're a nonprofit leader, if you need money, which is 100% of people everywhere, fitfundraising.com. Rainmaking book. Make sure to pick that up as well.
We'll put the link here for the Amazon link.
All the links, everything's going to be down there.
If you have trouble sleeping at night, that rainmaking book can help you. So
I love it.
It's because it'll give more cash in your pocket, and that's going to make you.
And by the way, Roy's in the Florida area, Tampa Bay region. I'm sure if you want to pay for his lunch or shadow him at a lunch to listen in, I'm sure coffee,
love it,
and pick his brain. And I'm sure there's a lot of leaders out there in the Florida region that he'll fly to you as well when he's out and about. So thank you, Roy.
Roy, thank you for helping us help leaders to go further and grow faster. And thank you guys for listening. We will see you on the next episode of the Nonprofit Renaissance.
Thanks again for listening to the Nonprofit Renaissance. We hope it ignites a renaissance in you and helps you go further and grow faster. Be sure to share, rate, and subscribe. And if you'd like to recommend or be a guest on our show, send us an email at podcast@burstcreative.com.